This is Kat.
And this is Brighton.
Welcome to Almost Retired in Mexico.
And today we're going to be talking about being part-time in Mexico and part-time in the United States.
It's really awesome. It is the best of both worlds by far.
And if you're wanting this video to be a parody of another YouTube channel because you think that this setup just is screaming for that, don't worry, we have something for you. We've got some guests who are going to be joining us later during this video.
So what we're going to share is our experience. We live part-time in Portland, Oregon and part-time in Paz, Mexico. And, you know, everyone's experience is going to be different.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh. But my guess is you're going to find it just as awesome as we do.
And there's a lot of people that live full-time in Mexico, and a lot of you still are living full-time in the United States. So we're just going to talk about the pros and cons of splitting your time between the two places. And for us,
Nuggy paws.
yeah. Oh, she's just going to scratch her butt on that.
Oh, that's the best part. You've got to get that.
And of course, we have Nugget joining us here, and she is taking a minute to scratch her butt on the tree behind us.
All right. So the first pro that I want to try to articulate is that it feels, I don't know, magical.
Yeah.
To live in two places. You know, like you can get into a rut as you know, get older and you're working and, you know, paying bills, whatnot, and time goes by really quickly. Well, what we figured out is if you live in two places, it's like having two vacations and adventures, and I don't know, it just feels magical. It's very exciting. Every day is new. And anyway, that's my biggest pro about living in two different places.
Yeah, and actually my therapist just this week was talking about the sensory connection to novelty. And I was like, oh my God, I need to write this down and talk about it in the video because this is so much about what we do. The more novelty you have in your life, the more time slows down. And that's one of the reasons why when you're a kid, it feels like time is moving really slowly. And when you're an adult, it feels like it's moving really fast because you start having less and less novelty the older you get. But you don't have to. You could just move to Mexico. A lot of people say that you could get more novelty by not buying a place in Mexico, by just like moving from place to place to place. That's a possibility too. And let's talk about the weather. We are here in Oregon right now, and it's gorgeous out. This is like the perfect summer weather. It, you know, is typically between 70 and 80 degrees, sunny, gorgeous. However, if you know Portland, it rains a good chunk of the year. Probably half the year it is just rain, 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 rain. However, cold, yes. A little bit of snow once in a while down in Mexico. So we spend those summers here in Oregon when the weather is nice, and we go down to Mexico when the weather's nice down there. The weather in La Paz gets a little hot in the summer, so typically kind of the tourist season, or the season where all the part-timers move south, is during the winter. So on the flip side, on the con side, is in La Paz, the summer is the time to be enjoying the water. So snorkeling, scuba diving, swimming with whales and the sea lion babies and things like that. That is mostly a summer activity. So one of the cons of leaving during the summer is that you miss out on a lot of those fun activities.
So the other pro is
There's more than one pro.
Some other pros are that we have two sets of really excellent friends now. We have our friends in Oregon and the States, and we've made these awesome friends down in Mexico. And if you've ever been in an expat situation or you're traveling, it's so much easier to make friends, especially at this age, to make friends in a situation where there's only like a few people maybe who speak English, or there's an expat community. Anyway, super tight, awesome friends in Mexico. Hi everyone, we'll be back there soon. So that's lovely. We have two awesome sets of friends.
And I gotta agree with Kat that a lot of our friends that we have here in Oregon, we've had for a dozen years or more. But I kind of feel like, our friend group down in Mexico is a closer group of friends, and we just met them within the last 2 years. It's such an experience of adventurous people and this kind of need to get along in a foreign country that actually makes it so much easier to make friends as an adult. So along with friends is family. So it's a lot easier to get around the United States. My family lives in Wisconsin and her family is, her sister's here in Portland. So very easy for her to get together with her sister and for me to fly over to Wisconsin. My mom is in her 80s. It's not really easy for her to travel down to Mexico, and it's not really easy to travel from La Paz, Mexico to Wisconsin. So while we're up here during the summer, we'll usually do the connections and the trips to visit family.
And while we're on the people theme, one of the things I love about living part-time in each place is people come to visit us. A lot of people come to visit us down in Mexico, which is fabulous. We love having people come, and people come here in Portland because they're destinations at the right time of the year to draw a lot of our friends and family.
And let me do a little bit of a flip side of that is that we are in those ideal places during the ideal time of the year. So it can be harder to rent out our place. So we rent out our place in Oregon when we're not here, but we don't rent out our place in Mexico when we're not there. It's the low season. It's harder to get tenants. It just doesn't seem like it's worth it for us for the amount of money we can get down in Mexico. Versus up here in Oregon, we've been really lucky to always find tenants to live in our house while we're gone. But it is one more thing to do, just the going back and forth and the planning for having a second. Oh, you thought of a con.
Yeah, here's the con to living in two places. When you have so many visitors, and our good friends warned us about this because we're still working.
Our good friends in Mexico.
Our good friends in Mexico warned us about this, and we're still working, and they're still working full time as well. And so everybody wants to come down and visit you, and they're on vacation, and they're drinking tequila and margaritas. They're like, Cameron, come to the beach, come this. And we're still trying to work. And so now what we tell people is, yes, please come, but during the day on the weekdays, we're working. We'll join you at night and go carousing or on the weekends, but you have to entertain yourselves during the week.
Definitely. And as Kat said, we do have visitors also coming to Portland, so kind of we're always in the tourist destination
Yeah.
year round.
I don't know if you know this already, but I am a huge gardener, and we actually own a small urban farm here in Portland, and that is, for me, like one of the best things. In Portland, you just put seeds even near the ground and they sprout up into like Jack and the Beanstalk. And so I spent a lot of time at my farm, growing vegetables and fruits and giving them away. And in Mexico, we also have a really, really much smaller
Huerta.
garden plot in the back of our yard. It's just a little bit more challenging, so I'm learning how to grow a lot of fruits and vegetables. I'm trying to eat water-wise. I know there's not water, and so I'm trying to water-wise several things. So I still get to garden in both areas, but Oregon's a lot easier.
And I think I'll speed that one up like by 20% just so that it goes a little faster.
You can
Medical care. I love medical care in Mexico. It's very affordable. It's very professional. They've got great equipment. Everything is wonderful down there. But our insurance, it's a lot easier to go through insurance in the United States. So for some things, it's easier to do in the United States. Like my dermatologist is here. It's easy to get in to see her, get it scheduled months in advance and go through the procedure and pay my copay instead of going down to Mexico where I can see a dermatologist like the next day, but they don't know me as well. If there was a bigger expense that actually showed up, I would have to file paperwork with our insurance company. I also have a treatment here. I'm not sure, I probably have talked about this a little bit, but I suffer from depression and I am getting a treatment here called TMS. And it's where they zap your head with magnetic stuff. It's only offered at one place in Mexico, and that's in Mexico City, and it's a long-term process. So having access to some of that from a medical side is nice. And I know there's a lot of folks who are on Medicare, and so that kind of works out really well, because Medicare, you can only get the service in the United States. So having the ability to go back and forth is nice. And speaking of going back and forth, why don't we bring out our guests now? So we have some friends who also have a YouTube channel, and they do go back and forth more on a 2 weeks here, 1 week there, 3 weeks there, 1 week here, back and forth. Unlike us, we go down in November and come back in May, and that's probably a little more typical, but there's a lot of people who do that back and forth pretty often. So, hey guys, come on over.
This is Ada.
And this is Stefan.
And this is Living Simply in Mexico.
We live part-time in Puerto Vallarta and part-time just outside San Francisco. And we actually go back and forth really often. So a few weeks here, a few weeks there.
some of the advantages of that is we get to keep close relationships in both places, especially if you have family or friends in the States or Canada. Makes that a little bit nicer.
And we don't need to do that really battening down the hatches of closing a house down for the entire season, because we just need to close it down while we go back and forth. Things like, you know, locking up the tequila.
And when we're in Puerto Vallarta in the off season, we can get reservations at our favorite restaurant, just like that.
Not having as many tourists around is great. Also, the sunsets are beautiful in the summer, and there's, you know, really great rainstorms, rain with lightning storms. One downside to going back and forth so often, part of it is just the airfare that we have to pay for going back and forth so often, and also it's not quite living simply. But one thing that does happen during the summer or late summer is hurricanes. So we have to run off and prepare for the hurricane that is coming tomorrow.
Well, thanks for having us on, Brighton. We really, really, really love your channel.
Really, really, really. Thank you guys so much for joining us on the channel here. Love your channel too, just as much as you love ours. And also Sean in Paradise too.
All right, so the only real con that I can think of living...
This is your second one now, and I've got like 3 or 4, so...
that I can think of living in Mexico is the dog situation. And as you might have seen from other videos, there's a lot of stray dogs that are neglected in Mexico, and we fostered a bunch, and we work with some great, a great organization that does fostering and neuter and spay down in Mexico. But it makes it harder to walk your dog in some places, right? Not all, this is just our experience, but we've actually walked our dog on the beach before, and 2 dogs came out, you know, I don't know if someone owned them or they were strays, and they actually attacked our dog. And so we've heard this a lot. People have to walk with big sticks or with mace, and so that's a con. And our dog loves to be social. Like in Portland, we take her to dog parks all the time, and she just, you know, runs around and is happy as a clam. Cannot do that as much, at least we haven't figured it out. In Mexico, we probably are going to have to talk with some of our friends and arrange play dates rather than going for like walks in the neighborhood.
So although Kat listed that as a con, that's really a pro, because if we were full-timers in Mexico, our dog would be really bored, but because we're part-timers in Mexico, she gets to spend half her time up here hanging out at the dog park.
Good point.
Okay, so here's my advice. I love shopping on Amazon, and it's a little more difficult in Mexico. You can still get things from Amazon.com or Amazon.com MX and Mercado Libre, but often there's an upcharge as it crosses the border, and sometimes it gets stuck for a while and things don't arrive
and
right away.
And not as much selection.
Maybe not, yeah, a little less selection, but here, also part of my business is I make videos for Amazon, and I get a lot of products for free, but those people won't pay for the shipping to go to Mexico. So while I'm here, I get all sorts of free things like this stand that's holding the camera and the light over here. People send me that to make videos. That's something I can only do in the United States. Also, I just got a new computer here in Oregon. We're a zero tax state, so I didn't have to pay any tax to get that computer here in the United States. That would have been, first off, a lot more, it would have been more expensive as the computer is, and then we would have had to pay an import tax of like 16%. So electronics can get pretty expensive down in Mexico. So while you're up in the States, buy those electronics.
One other thing that I really love about living in both locations is you get to experience the culture, right? You get to experience the culture of Portland. It's called the Amsterdam of the United States. And then we also get to experience the like incredibly warm and generous and friendly culture down in Mexico, where it's very family oriented. People are just so sweet and so nice all the time. The con, though, is, well, it's both ways.
It's kind of a con,
yeah,
because you get used to this con, and then you kind of come back to the United States and you reset. So tell them what the con is.
So the con is, in the U.S., it's pretty easy to get things done. Like, everything is set up to be as efficient as possible.
You do it online in like minutes.
Yeah. And in Mexico, it usually takes, you know, it's not as efficient sometimes.
It takes hours to do just about everything.
It just takes a little bit more time to get like your electricity set up, or you'll pay your electricity bill, or whatever it is. The way I look at it is, when I'm in each culture, it makes me appreciate that culture, and then it makes me appreciate things about the other culture better. So I just come away grateful for both.
Yep, I'll take that. So of course this means that we have 2 houses, and so we have 2 times the maintenance and 2 times the bills. And as Kat mentioned about the paying bills sometimes isn't so easy down in Mexico. It can be somewhat of a chore. Really, what's kind of fun though about the maintenance stuff is sometimes I enjoy doing maintenance stuff. Like, I had to redo part of our deck out here, and that was fun. It was a very small project, but the beauty also is that when we live down in Mexico, I can hire people to do a lot of these projects, and so the projects end up being much bigger, much more fun, much more well built than what I do, and much less expensive. So it's kind of nice to have those 2 worlds of home maintenance.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up by, of course, talking about food, right? The best Mexican food you could ever have is in Mexico. Right? And it is incredible. I went to lunch, Brighton and I went to lunch with this other couple who were thinking about moving to La Paz, and I had a whole fried snapper, and I think it was like $7. Like, the food is just phenomenal in Mexico.
Affordable.
And affordable, yes.
Way more affordable. We can afford to eat out every meal of the day if we wanted to in Mexico.
That's where I was going to go, is like we eat out way more in Mexico than we do in the States because it's just so much more affordable. The only con is maybe there's not as much variety. Like, we go to this Indonesian restaurant that's, a couple streets away here in Portland, and we have everything. I don't know if there's an Indonesian restaurant in La Paz. There might be. We haven't found it yet. So maybe the selection's a little bit more narrow, but still, food is phenomenal, super affordable.
Yeah, but then we can, when we come back to the States, eat out at those restaurants the food that we can't get in Mexico.
Sure.
So if you're thinking about moving to Mexico, you can do it however you want. You can buy a house, you can rent, you can live part-time there, you can live part-time in the United States. You can break it up over like week by week by week. There's so many options. And as we talked about earlier, that novelty of every time you switch up, either switch a location or go back or go down, it's just everything changes a little bit. So when we come back to Oregon, we're like, oh, look, a new store over there and things like that. So the novelty ends up being on both ends.
So be sure to like, subscribe, and join our Facebook group.
Oh, that's actually Ada and Stefan's Facebook group. There'll be a link down below. And also watch these videos down here.